Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast, and with us today we have Andrew Frankel. Hello.
Hi Sam, how are you?
Very good, very good. For those that have sort of not come across you for some reason, in a sort of sentence, can you say sort of who you are, what you do?
People increasingly refer to me as a veteran motoring journalist. I take some exception to, but I have been doing it for over 30 years. I write about cars. I've been doing it all my professional life. Started at Autocar, edited Motorsport magazine, went freelance 21 years ago, and I now have a little venture called the Intercooler, which I expect we'll get on to talking about at some stage. That's me. I drive cars and I write about them. Very straightforward. Can't do anything else.
Yes, for those that haven't come across Andrew, few and far between, we did a podcast a while ago. It was sort of a year ago today, and we talked a lot about Andrew's sort of past and journey to date up until that point. So if you're interested in that, go and listen to the previous podcast. But we will sort of start off from where we left off. And at the time we last spoke, you were doing this thing. I think at the time it was called Drive Nation.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think it had changed name yet.
No.
With another guest of our podcast, Dan, and it's sort of evolved a little bit since then.
Yeah, it's evolved a huge amount.
Well, you've released an app. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the sort of backstory, which I'll keep very brief, is 3 and a bit years ago, Dan and I started an Instagram site called Drive Nation, which we wanted to do sort of car journalism on Instagram, which we didn't think there was very much of it. Then we just started doing news and reviews and features and that sort of stuff. And the idea was, because it's very difficult to earn money on Instagram, but we thought we could build a following which might attract some investment, which then might allow us to go off and do something which we could actually earn a living from. And so Drive Nation bumbled along. We picked up, a decent number. I mean, I think we got sort of 40-odd thousand followers following what we did, which was great. A chap came along. Real car guy, but with an amazing business CV, and said he liked what we did and just wanted to talk about ways of backing us. And so we had this idea of doing an app. So the idea behind what we did was that we would try to provide the finest quality car journalism by the finest car journalists that there are, and indeed others, designers and engineers, of a kind of quality that you'd hope to get in a quarterly magazine. But instead of making people wait, 3 months for it to turn up, we'd do it every day. So every single day there would be a new story by one of these characters on this app. And we thought that in this world where people always want everything yesterday, that might appeal. So the first thing that our investor pointed out was that the Drive Nation name wasn't trademarked, and we discovered that we couldn't trademark it because somebody else had already done it, or they hadn't done it. No, but they'd been using it before us. So if it ever came to a dispute, they would have sort of first dibs on that, and so we had to come up with another name, that's where the Intercooler got born, and. So we changed the name of the Instagram site to the Intercooler. The app launched in, where are we now? So the app will launch in April as the Intercooler. So we're 6 months in. We've had the most extraordinary response to it. I sometimes, if I feel in need of a bit of flattery, I'll sort of go onto either the Google or the Apple App Store and read what people are writing about the app. And it's incredible. I mean, more than anything else, it's incredibly reassuring that that the idea appears to have found some resonance in people. People absolutely love it. And you don't need my word for it, just go and see what people are saying about it. And I can say that because actually I only do a bit of the writing for it, whereas on Instagram it was Dan and I doing all of it because no one was paying us, and so we couldn't afford to pay anyone to write for us. Because the Intercooler app is it's a subscription app which you pay either £5 a month for or £50 a year for, we have a bit of money coming in. So we then thought, okay, so what we want a dream team. We want to go and get the best people that we can possibly find who are kind enough or stupid enough or whatever enough to want to work for us, and get them to produce all this amazing content. So, for the world of motoring journalism, we've got guys like Colin Goodwin and Henry Catchpole and Andrew English, who in their own fields are as good as they get. I've gone back and hired a couple of my old mates who are who were world famous names from way back, guys like Mel Nichols, who's basically the father of modern motoring journalism. What he did at Car Magazine in the 1970s and 1980s, I think an awful lot of us. That's half the reason that we do what we do. Peter Robinson, who was the European editor of Autocar for many years, formerly editor of Wheels in Australia, and I think probably the greatest motoring journalist, I've ever come across. He's doing stuff for us. We've got Ben Oliver, who is probably the greatest features writer I know, doing stuff for us. And then we've got, engineers, David Tuig, the father of the Alpine A110. He writes some fantastic stuff for us about that. We have a girl called Jo Fidalgo, who is, she was a powertrain engineer at JLR. She's now moved into the chassis world and has some amazing insights into that. And Julian Thompson, the bloke who designed the latest Elise, and former design director for JLR. We always wanted a designer, and I always wanted Julian because I know that unlike many designers, he doesn't have an enormous ego. So I said, what do you think? And he went, well, it's a great idea, but I can't write. I've never written anything in my life. I just design cars. I draw, I don't write. So I said to him, well, that's okay because, we can, we're journalists. We're very used to, dealing with raw copy, and, we can hopefully, turn it into whatever. I said, just write something. He went, all right, I'll try. Didn't hear anything for a few weeks, and then something turned up, and it was just beautiful. And he went, oh, but, tell me where all the way go wrong, and I'll try and put it right. I said, don't change anything. And he's just one of these really annoying guys who can just do it. He can just do it. And I think it's because, A, he's super intelligent and he's a massive car guy, but also I think he's just spent his entire career reading motoring journalism and and the best writers. And I think if you do that for long enough and you have a certain sort of brain, I think the sort of the voice that you want to hear comes into you, and then he's just able to get it back out of him again. And he writes about car design, which is not really an area I've particularly ever understood, because I'm much more about how cars drive than what they look like. But he writes about them in such an accessible way. So anyway, long story short, we have all these amazing people all writing for the Intercooler app, and I can't quite believe it, really. So 6 months in, it's gone brilliantly well, and we have a lot of work still to do. There's all sorts of things that we want to do. We need to have a proper website. We need to do sort of merchandising and stuff like that. And we have some great partnerships with some really, really good organisations like Motorsport UK and the British Automobile Racing Club and Gold Track and Footman James, and we've got a few more that are coming on soon. So it's all very exciting and it's all very busy. And I'm still sort of slightly bewildered by everything because if I think about what I do, I drive cars and I write about them, and this is all sort of business, and we're having to think about things like digital marketing, which probably guys like you probably know inside out. But to me, it's like going back to school because I don't understand any of this stuff. I hope it doesn't show too much. I mean, luckily we do have people who do understand it, and so it's kind of okay. But yesterday I spent all day in a meeting with Dan and our investor, just talking about the future and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And it all just seems terribly serious. And it's all, and when people start talking about money and the numbers are all sort of, and there's a little bit of me which just sitting there thinking, can't I just go and drive something? But at the same time, to have the opportunity to create something from scratch and to actually build something, because I spent my life as almost all motoring journalists working for other people, be they as a member of staff or as a freelance contributors, to actually have something which was your idea. And no one can tell you how to do it because it's your show and you can just make it the way you want to make it. It's just such a privilege, and I absolutely love it. So hopefully, if enough people subscribe, we'll get to keep on doing it for a while.
Has that been, because for you, like you said, going from writing for other people all the time to then having your own thing that you're responsible for and you're not writing all the content?
Yeah.
Has that been quite a learning and interesting process? What are sort of things that you didn't expect that have come up? Well,
I didn't expect that engineers and designers would just be able to go and write. It's made me feel thoroughly redundant as a journalist. Nobody does this. Nobody gets these guys to write stuff for them. And I think it's because we're all so arrogant. We think we're the only ones who can do it because we're journalists and that's what we do. So you're a designer. Well, you design cars. You're an engineer. You engineer cars. But actually, we're all just car enthusiasts, they are almost by definition, if you rise to the top of those particular trees, highly intelligent people who love cars. And so we probably shouldn't be that surprised that they can express their thoughts in a way that communicates well. So that's been a particular joy. Being able to assemble this family of journalists, and I genuinely don't think that you could look at any publication anywhere in the world. I don't think anybody's got a better lineup of motoring journalists than us. And I feel, and this will sound sort of slightly humble brag, but it really isn't. I feel genuinely amazed that these guys will want to come and work for us. It's not like we've got huge amounts of money to pay them. But I think what they do is they identify that, I think they all like working with each other. And I think they all like having their words associated with other people, with the words of the other contributors, because they're all so good. And so, together, we're almost greater than the sum of our parts. But even so, it is a slightly humbling thing to think of all those amazing people, particularly, the older guys like, Peter Robinson and Mel Nichols. I mean, Mel Nichols, effectively taught me how to write an autocar in the 1980s. And the fact that it's now me sort of commissioning him, it feels rather weird. But, I feel lucky to have done it. I have to work very hard at the moment because, I haven't given up any of the other things that I do. So I still, write for Autocar lots. I still write for Motorsport lots. I still have my column in Goodwood, and I still do, other bits here, there and everywhere. So, I've learned the meaning of hard work. I thought I worked quite hard before the Intercooler turned up. It turns out I didn't. So that's another interesting learning experience. And on top of all of that, obviously, we've not been living in the most normal of times, have we?
No.
I mean, it has helped to an extent because we've not been travelling quite so much. It has given me more time on the ground to do all this sort of stuff that we need to do. But then, there have been fewer stories to go out and do. So it's, it swings and roundabouts. But, so far, so good.
Yeah, I particularly love the sort of design and engineering, like David stuff. We sort of talk on Twitter every now and then because I'm heavily involved in this sort of industry and space, and I'm consuming media by the bucket load.
Yeah.
But like you said, you do not see stuff
Yeah.
from engineers and designers like putting out sort of thoughtful behind the scenes information. And yeah, I find it incredibly, like, so much more interesting than what's the new 812 blah, 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 blah. Like, it's going to be similar to the other one, but it's just such a different shift to all of the media you're consuming. And I particularly really enjoy that.
David is, he's just a gifted communicator. I mean, I do urge, you can go and download the app for free. We won't charge you until you've been looking at it for a month. Just go read his stuff. His ability to communicate. We always say that, being a motoring journalist, it's quite a strange skill set because you have to be able to drive, and you have to be able to write, but that's not actually enough because you have to be able to link those two. You have to be able to, if you're reviewing a car, understand what the car is doing, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and then be able to communicate. So there are three strands to it. And I think that's what made us, those of us who are able to do that, think that we're sort of fairly safe in our space, is that because that's a very strange combination of skills to have, that there probably aren't many other people who do that. And then someone like David comes along and just, makes us look, well, I mean, he's absolutely as good as us. But he also, in addition to that, whereas we always, report on other people's work and criticize other people's work, he's got that track record. He's a bloke who actually, got out there and did it and actually, engineered cars and made, cars to be as good as they can possibly be in their respective fields. And it's just amazing that they can also do this other stuff as well. So, and also they're also just a delightful bunch of people. One of the reasons for doing it is, I spent quite a long part of my life working for, one or two editors who I didn't particularly get along with terribly well, but maybe they were part of publications which I felt I needed to be part of. And so I put up with a lot of stuff. And I've now got to an age and a stage in my career where I just don't want to do that anymore. And the number one rule of, if you want to come and work for the Intercooler, don't be an arse. You've just got to be a decent person. You've got to have fun, and we have a ridiculous WhatsApp group between us where we just spend our time taking the piss out of each other, and it's just a lovely family of like-minded individuals. And the fact that some of them happen to be superstars in the field of engineering or design is really neither here nor there, and we all just get on and have a great time together and have lots of fun. And at the end of it, there's a product which we're all proud of. So that's just brilliant. It's kind of like wins all round. We feel very blessed to be able to do it.
And it comes across like, it seems like from the outside of I've met a couple of the people that write for it, and they're all nice, fun people, and having an atmosphere like that. And you don't have, that one person that no one gets on with. No. Or if you did, then you're like, yeah, okay, thank you very much, but maybe we won't continue. And then you don't have any of those people just sort of bringing the whole overall thing down. When you fired up the app for the first time, or not as in opened it for the first time, but said, hey, go and download, what was the conversion rate like from your Instagram account? Because I know that's always a question, like, well, how many people are going to download it? I have no idea.
The Instagram thing it's the business side of it is, I'm still trying to get my head around it, but it's quite interesting because obviously we had this captive audience on Instagram. There are about 50,000 of them now, and we'd love all of them to go and subscribe to the app. But the world isn't like that. If you provide people with free stuff, then they will tend to not choose to pay for other stuff that you're also providing. And we thought we'd get, we thought we'd be very lucky to get 5% of them subscribe. Well, a bit more than that has happened.
Nice.
But the other thing is, I often say, as a joke, that if we wanted to get as many of our Instagram people to subscribe as possible, what we do is shut Instagram. We just shut the Instagram account, because if we did that, everybody on that who did enjoy what we wanted would have to go and subscribe, because that would be the only way that they could go and do it. And given that we don't earn money directly from Instagram, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't been tempted, because it's a monster. It takes a huge amount of work. The difference is, those 50,000 people are the people we partner up with want to be in front of.
Okay.
And so we have, an increasing number of associations with some, I listed them earlier, some like-minded brands.
Yeah.
And they are very interested in the Instagram following. So we want to maintain that. So we have to keep on feeding it. And the problem with that is, if you continue to feed it, you continue to give people reasons not to subscribe to the app. So there's a balance. So, if you like, Instagram is there, A, because you enjoy doing it, but B, because it's what the partners want. But we at the same time want as many of them to come and subscribe to us as well. But we sort of disincentivize them for doing that by still keeping up decent content on the Instagram side. So, we're still getting our head around that one, but we only have two revenue streams. One is from partnerships, one is from subscribers, because we don't have any advertising, and that was a thing from the absolute start. We were not going to do, banners or display or pop-ups or clickbait or any of that sort of stuff. We were going to do partnerships with like-minded individuals, and we were going to have subscribers, and that's it. So, if you like, in very, very basic terms, Instagram's for the partners, and the subscribers sort of come from the app, and that's how we pay the rent.
That's interesting. I can totally see that balance being really tricky, because like as a random person myself, and looking at what you guys done, I've gone, the Instagram account gives me quite a lot. And then you look at the app and you get more and whatnot, and you can see how some people might go, okay. And then I guess for you guys, it is that difficulty of you want the audience on Instagram to grow and reach more people, which is helping promote.
Yeah.
And then also for your sponsors and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's finding the amount of content that still does that whilst not doing too much, and creating so much hassle for you guys that it's a pain in the ass.
And you also have to accept that people have very busy lives, and sometimes Instagram, that little sort of bite-sized chunk is not only all they want. It's frankly, it may be all they have time for, and maybe they don't have time. to sit down and read, a 1,500-word story on an app. And we don't want to, these guys, most of them been with us from the start, and we don't want to, I joke about shutting it down, but we actually don't want to, lose those people because, we appreciate the following that we have. We enjoy providing stuff that they enjoy reading, and why wouldn't you keep on doing it? So, the good news is we're only 6 months in. It's gone very well so far. But the other thing I would say is that if you look at the app and the sort of writing that is on the app, and you just think of Instagram generally and the sort of person who spends most of their time on Instagram. Your typical Instagram user and your typical app user are not the same person. We think that people who are interested in subscribing to the app will probably largely not be on Instagram, and yet we've still got a big following from Instagram to subscribe. So what we hope is that outside the world of Instagram, which is basically all we focused on so far, there is an even bigger following waiting to be found, and that's the big challenge of the next 6 months: is to go out and find them. Go out and find actually the people who you would more naturally would expect to be drawn towards the sort of product that we have with the app, and they may be people who aren't even on social media. They may be people who have stopped consuming any form of motoring journalism because they find it, all rather facile. And it's a big challenge. We absolutely believe they're there. We know from all the reviews and the ratings and everything else that we get that the product is right. So we're not going to change that very much. We're going to keep that family together. We may add one or two people. But we're going to continue to do that. But we need, one of the problems with an app is it lives in a bubble. You can't really, it's not like, you can like or retweet stuff or it can't really proliferate beyond what it is very easily. So, if we had a website, which we don't at the moment, that would help with that. So that's something that we're looking at. There are all sorts of things that we're looking at doing. And we're very lucky that we're in a position to be able to do it. So, in our own time, because we're still very, very young, it's only been 6 months, we will roll this stuff out and see what happens.
Yeah. I think as a consumer, I would love there to be a website.
Yeah.
I would way rather personally read it on a website than on an app.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Just screen sizes, everything. Like you said, it's early days and it's a case of working with all these things. I think absolutely your audience is on Instagram. I think there will be people that are not on Instagram, and there's probably a big audience there. But I think there's definitely, I'm endlessly surprised by the people that are on Instagram.
Yeah. And
I think often with maybe, social media influencers, people go, oh, they're only followed by whatever. And then they just say like 14-year-olds or something.
Sure.
And then you look at the people commenting on posts, and you're like, oh, actually, there's 3 McLaren F1 owners in that comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like most people, definitely, I would say, I don't know, 50s and below, dabble with it.
I mean, they're clearly in both places, and the difference for us is we have, certainly as far as our current following is concerned, we've made it perfectly clear to them that we have the app, and I think that the majority of people who were going to subscribe to us from the Instagram site probably already have. But obviously beyond Instagram, there is this other world which we haven't focused upon. So we need to go out and find them. I mean, it was quite interesting. We did our first ever track day a few weeks ago at Thruxton, and we did it with a lot of people that we partnered with.
Awesome.
Oh, it was absolutely unbelievable. I'll probably bore you about it in a minute, but we did it with Bark, who are one of our partners who runs Thruxton. We did it with Gold Track Day Company, the best track day company, obviously. I know I would say that they really are. And we did it with Footman James. And so because there were all these different organizations involved, not all the people who came because of the Intercooler. Some were invited by Gold Track, some came because they were guests of Footman James, and so on and so forth. So, and I was surprised by the number of people at our own track day who hadn't heard of us. There were people, I was introducing myself to Andrew Frankel, the Intercooler, well, what's that? And these are guys, these are like sort of fairly hardcore track day.
That's kind of
good. It is good, but they're clearly, we hadn't, despite everything that we've tried, we hadn't reached them. And then you show it to them and they go, oh, that's interesting. And they download it and then hopefully they go and subscribe. But, I was surprised that even at something as, familiar as your own track day, which you think you're hosting, there are still people there who haven't heard of you. So that suggests to me is that there is a big audience out there that, we need to go and find. And that's, that is as I said, that's the job of the next 6 months.
Yes.
So we'll see.
It's really interesting with those sorts of things because you sort of assume I sort of assumed that making podcasts, whatever, getting interesting guests, doing things, that sort of stuff, that you will slowly reach the people, but it can take such a long time to reach those people. And like you said, there will be so many people that will love your content, your app, your whatever, that will never come across it unless their mate goes, hey, have you come across this? Or they're in some place and they see a little slogan or they see you've got a track day and it's, it's like reaching those people is hard. But your track day looked awesome.
Oh, the track day was fantastic. Yeah. So we wanted to do from the start, we didn't want to just do another track day because why would that? I mean, we've always tried to do different stuff. So when we started Drive Nation, we were the first people doing motoring journalism on Instagram. And when we started the Intercooler app, we were the first people who had a dedicated motoring journalism app, and we still are. And so we just want to do stuff that people haven't done before. So we had this idea of doing a track day with a bit extra. So we managed to get Thruxton on one of its 4 unlimited noise days of the year. So you could run anything. You could run Formula One cars. And they'd never run one of those. They'd always had those as test days. They'd never done an unsilenced track day before in the history of Thruxton.
Wow.
And that meant we could bring a few friends and have a few cars down. And so that's how I found myself driving a Group C Jaguar around Thruxton a few weeks ago. Because Henry Pearman, who is a friend of mine and a friend of ours, brought some amazing stuff. He brought down a Mercedes CLK GTR, he brought a 962 Porsche, and he brought a Group C Jag. And then suddenly, you have the people there who are just there to drive their cars around the track, and they just see this extraordinary stuff going around. We, another one of our most valuable contributors is Karen Chandok. And Karen's a dude, but he's a complete petrol head, and he's also a total professional. And so, we said, fancy coming down, and it was literally the day before he had to go off to the Dutch Grand Prix, but he went, oh yeah, fair enough, I'll come down. And so Karen Porsche provided him with a 911 Turbo S, and he just spent all day, shredding its tires. And people really appreciated that. We got quite lucky because Sky were filming something down there in our lunch hour. And so we had Martin Brundle and Damon Hill and a couple of Sharknose Ferraris down there too.
Nice.
I'd like to say that we planned that, but we didn't, but they were around too. So that went down quite well. But the absolute best thing about it, and we have to find a way of making this happen again, is, you've done, bazillions of track days, and you always get a few arses there. You'll always get 1 or 2 people who get a bit punchy out on the circuit. They don't like being overtaken. They take it all too seriously. They push too hard. And then the problem is the moment someone goes off, everything has to shut, and everybody's fun is spoiled. We didn't have, I think we might have had 1 car spin. We didn't have a red flag all day. There wasn't a minute when they had to stop the action. And if I've been to a track day where that's happened, I can't remember how long ago it was. It was the atmosphere. Everybody was just so happy to be there. Everybody got on so well. I mean, we feared, because it's Thruxton, which is, fast, very easy to fall off. And because people probably haven't been doing many track days, that there's quite a lot of pent up testosterone and people want to go out there.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't any. People were just so happy to see each other, so happy to just talk about cars. The driving standards on the circuit were as good as I've seen at a track day, and that combined with everything else that went on, just created this fantastic day. So we're going to do it again. We made it at Thruxton, we made it somewhere else, but it will be a noisy day. We will have racing cars there, and we will do our absolute utmost to make sure that everybody who comes for the right reason, which is just to have fun and not be a pain in the ass.
I would love to know when that is. Before
we'll let you know. Let me know.
I'll come.
Yeah, we're going to try and do it early next year. And
Awesome.
Gold Track, who are our track day partner, they are already on the case, scoping out what's possible and where. So I shall really look forward to that.
It's so cool seeing, and I've seen it a little bit, but seeing cars like CLK, GTR, stuff like that driving around. I know you can't promise that's going to happen on every track day, but like I've been exposed to those sorts of things quite a bit. But even then, like this, just awesome.
But the novelty never wears off, does it?
No. And if you're on track and something like that goes past you, that like makes your year.
Absolutely. I was a bit worried about sort of going out in the Jag with a bunch of road cars. But in fact, particularly at Thruxton, and also the other thing that we did, we made it quite expensive, because we needed to, but also because we thought it'd be better to have for our first track day, to have a smaller number of people there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't always, like there 30 cars on track. And because Thruxton's such a big place, it's such a wide circuit around the back, and you can get in a Group C Jag, and you can really, properly exercise the car without being a menace to other people. Whereas if you'd gone to other circuits and had been really, really busy, you just couldn't have deployed a car like that because it wouldn't have been safe to do it. But again, because everybody knew what we were doing and because everybody was being sensible, it was easy.
Yeah.
It was easy.
Yeah, you really need the other drivers to be vaguely paying attention when you're in something that's significantly faster. But then I think, as we've talked about before, about driving down a road, like you can tell whether the car in front has an idea. On track, you can do the same thing. Like you know straight away whether they've seen you, not seen you, whether they're just going to chop you. Yeah. But then with Gold Track, what are the track day rules? Is it passing only on the left with consent?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's it, because RMA is passing either side. I don't know if you have a view on which is the right way. I'm not sure it really matters as long as everybody knows and everybody goes along with it. I mean, Gold Track. I mean, I think RMA is, quite hardcore, and you tend to get a lot of very fast drivers in very fast cars. And I think if you've got one of those, that's absolutely fine. But you wouldn't turn up, I don't think, to an RMA day in a 1,500 quid MX-5 you just bought.
No.
Whereas you could at a Gold Track day, because although they do have the quick stuff, I think, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. Even though Gold Track are partners with me, and we couldn't hope for a better track day partner. I think they're just catering for slightly different sorts of punters. And I think the Gold Track is definitely more accessible. And certainly if you're ever going to go and do your first track day, I'd be pointing in the direction of the Gold Track before RMA. That said, if you've got, I don't know, a Manthey GT2 RS and you really want to go and wring its nuts, then, other options are available.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my first track days was an RMA day. Yeah. And they don't happen anymore, but they used to be quite sort of legendary, for not the great best reasons, introductions, speeches at the beginning of an RMA day by an individual. And he was quite like harsh. It's about anyone that was like new. It was basically like, you don't mess up or blah, 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 blah. And I came out of that day pretty like, I'm not sure I'm going to go to one of them. But now, having done tons of track days, I think your point about the speed of your car is huge. For me, generally, if I'm in a track day now, I'm in something quite quick. And often it's just, I'm in my radical. So for me, I will only do a test day, or I'll possibly do an RMA day. But I won't do anything else in a radical because your speed differential is too quick, and you just can't. You can't do a lap.
Yeah, you can't do a lap. Everybody else hates you.
Properly
because
hates
you're
you.
always and you're actually right, and it's just horse of courses, isn't it? The moment you start bringing, slicks and wings and downforce to a track day environment, then it's a different sort of animal, isn't it? And you need to be out there with people who are going at hopefully not dissimilar speeds. And who also understand all of that. So, experienced track day goers.
I think it's something that's very easy to forget, that if someone's on their first track day, you going round the outside at I don't know, Abbey at 125 miles an hour, like 6 inches from their car, is going to freak them out massively.
Yeah.
Whereas
Massively.
if they've done loads of racing and whatever, that might not. But it's I think lots of people forget.
Yeah, I did probably the last track day I did was at, excuse me, at Donington, and I was basically just doing customer ride. Bell Sport and Classic asked me to go and give some customer rides in there. They've got a 488 challenge car, so the slowest Ferrari racing car that there is, and
Yeah.
it was like an obstacle course. And I don't think people kind of understand that when you get in something that is actually a racing car and that is designed to race, just how much faster it is than any other road car. And I had to drive very defensively in that, because what you cannot do is assume that the person that you are, who you are closing on a speed of, 30, 40 miles an hour relative to them, gets what your car can do, and will just, do what you require them to do to keep you both safe. And I think, as you're the car behind approaching, the onus is on you, isn't it? And so if anyone's going to back out, and make sure that it's safe, then it's going to be you. And, doing what you're doing, if you're just giving, customer rides, it doesn't matter. You're not trying to set the lap time. Who cares? It's all part of the fun. But, it's, you have to know with those track days, don't you? Who's out there, or else you simply cannot make any kind of assumptions at all, because that's when it goes wrong, isn't it? You could be, also, somebody could be doing their first ever track day, and they could be in a really good fast car. They could be in a GT3 RS. And so you still see a GT3 RS out there and think, he knows what he's going to do, what he's doing. Well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's his first track day. Maybe he's the mate of the owner of the GT3 RS and he's never done anything like it before in his life. You just can't, so if in doubt, you have to back out of it, don't you?
Yeah. And your point about knowing the different speeds of cars, like it takes a while before there is a 488 challenge, but it's at the other end of the start-finish straight, and I'm 2/3 down. But the reality is, I've got 67 horsepower or something in a Citroen, maybe, and it might get to me before I turn in.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas you just go like, oh, that car's miles behind.
Yes, and it's not just its ability to gain speed. It's it's brakes and it's cornering speed, isn't it? And you can never expect someone to be looking in the mirrors, can you? It's kind of nice when they do, and you hope that they will, but you can't expect it, because that's when really, really big accidents happen. And if I may regret saying this, but if I ever tangled with someone on a track day and I'm the bloke behind, I think I would struggle to say it was their fault, unless they did something absolutely ridiculous, like just nerfed me.
It's not. And I remember very early days having instruction from someone, and they were getting annoyed. And I was quite apprehensive on the track of other cars, and they were getting really annoyed because they were like, don't look in your mirrors. Like, stop looking in your mirrors. Stop freaking out about stuff that's behind you. It's not your problem. And that's... Yeah. Not many people will probably say that to people, but a lot of
it's absolutely true.
It's so true.
So the first race I ever did on the Nürburgring, God knows when, 20 years ago, maybe more. I was in a Clio Cup car, little 2-litre, 200 horsepower thing.
Yeah.
And it was a 6-hour VLN race, and at the other end of the field, there were Vipers and V8 BMW M3 GTRs with people like Hans Stuck driving them. And I was doing exactly that. I was the rabbit. I was good. I was driving along like this because even on a circuit as big as the Nordschleife, after a bit they start coming around and you've got 180 cars in the race, and these guys, they hunt in packs. And also the other particular problem with the Nürburgring is because there's only one straight, the rest of the time the track's doing this, you can't see them coming. British airfield circuits, you can always look in the mirror, you can always look down the track and you can see where they are. At the Nürburgring, you'll just be, on the wrong side of a brow of a hill, and suddenly there'll be 8 of the bastards, and all you'll see is just this wall of light. And they're going round you, over you, under you, any way at all. And I just got really, really terrified, and I started trying to get out of these people's way. And eventually I just thought to myself, this is insane. Because, I was going to go and one of the things that I was doing was I was basically trying to drive off the circuit to get out of their way. And then you're on the marbles and you've got all the rubber on your tire, and you're just making, a difficult job even more difficult. And in the end, I did exactly that. I just knocked the mirror. And I just pretended that they weren't there. And it was fine after that. I just stuck on the racing line. I did what I was doing, and made it their problem. And they all got past. Nobody waved their fist at me. That's actually what they're expecting you to do. And it's only when you start to do different stuff that actually, it's like the road to hell, isn't it? Being paved with good intention. You're going to have the accident trying to help someone.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to move out of the way.
Yeah. Do you remember when Richard Hammond had that crash in the Silverstone 24-hour race years and years ago, which they filmed, and he was in that diesel-powered BMW, and he took out. He tried to get out of someone's way and didn't see the car behind the car he was trying to get out of the way of. So he went one way, just as the car behind, which was the lead of the race, popped out from behind this thing he was trying to get out, and literally went into the space this other car needed to get past, and then bang, and that was that. And he took out the leader of the race. And that's such an understandable rookie error, isn't it? Because you're just trying to help. You're just saying, I'm going to, I've seen this much faster car coming, so I'm going to let him go, and I'm just going to get out of it, bang. So don't do that. Just keep going. Do what you're going to do, and let them get on with it.
And then if you're the driver behind, and on a track day, let's say, you come across the same cars all the time, so you become aware, and you start to do things like, that one car spooks the entire time, as in they're trying to be helpful. So you then drive very differently around them, as in you basically say, I'm here, I'm coming through. Yes. I'm not going to try and go around you. I'm not going to try and leave you space in the right place. I'm just going to get in your way, and you're going to move out the way, because anything else I can't predict.
Well, exactly. That's what you have to do, isn't it? It's different when you're doing long distance racing, because you can come up across the same car which behaved in a particular way the last time you saw it, and you can come across it again 10 minutes later and it's behaving in a completely different way, because unbeknownst to you, sometimes it's got a different person behind the wheel. So that's a whole new. So with the sort of long distance racing I tend to do, you can't make any assumptions about anything. It's really difficult, but it's all part of the fun.
Yeah, drive what you see. So you got to drive an XJR9 Group C car at this track day. Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah. It had been an XJR9. So it was a car that started life as XJR8 and became an XJR9. And I think it's now back as an XJR8. What can I say? Group C Jaguar. My first ever Le Mans was in '88 when that actual car was in that race. It didn't finish it, but and to think that one day would come when you'd be in that car hooning around. This was the actual car so obviously Jaguar won Le Mans in '88 with the XJR9. In '87, it had won the World Sports Car Championship, the first time Jaguar had ever won a World Sports Car Championship. So even all those Le Mans it won in the 1950s had never won the championship. In '87, they won the championship, and it was that actual car that won the championship for Raul Boesel that I was driving around Thruxton that day. I mean, what a privilege. So firstly, you're sitting there thinking, I can't quite believe I'm in this. It's quite cozy in there if you're 6'3" like I am, so I'm a bit sort of like this behind the wheel. And if I'm honest with you, it's not a particularly easy car to drive. And I don't mean that by road car standards. I mean that by sort of Group C car. And if you think of a Porsche 962 as the sort of the archetypal Group C car, Porsche designed their cars because they had a customer program. They needed to sell these cars to lots and lots of people, whereas Jaguar didn't. They deliberately made them easy to drive so that gentlemen drivers could get in them and drive them at night in the rain at Le Mans, having already had hours now, and the car would always look after them. And so they had proper ventilation, they had synchromesh gearboxes, you could see out of them, visibility was quite good. They handled very predictably. That was the secret of those cars' success. Jaguar didn't need any of that because they were only ever going to be driven by professional racing drivers. So they just made them as fast as they possibly could. And they had this massive 7-litre V12 block of metal behind you. And you really don't want that moving around, particularly with a Group C car where you've got the full ground effect bodywork, massive amounts of downforce, fast slicks. It's not like a Mark II Escort. It's not the sort of thing you want to be sliding around. And you can upset it very easily. You can upset it, particularly under braking into tight corners, and you can upset it if you just get a bit too ambitious with the throttle on the way out. And so you just have to drive within itself, drive within yourself, and the faster you go, the better it gets. So it doesn't really it's got, these cars always had, some of them didn't even, they had like what they call spool differentials, which aren't even differential at all really. And so in very slow corners, they push and they push and they push. And they've also got massive spring rates on them because they generate so much downforce. You need that spring rate just to support the body, just to maintain the ride height. And so you need fast stuff. And that's the one thing that the Thruxton does, is it's not short of fast corners. And so once you get the tyres hot and once you get it singing, you get into that really scary bit where you kind of think, I'm not sure there's a speed. You think this car will go around any corner at any speed. You can just think to yourself, the owner, I don't know about anybody listening to this, they know Thruxton. I mean, Church is probably the most scary corner in motor racing. And the owner, when he got into the car, he hadn't driven it for years, and he's flat in fifth through Church. And I'm just thinking, and when I was driving, I wasn't flat in fifth, but I was still pulling 6.2 in top before braking for the chicane, which even with sprint gearing is, I'll think about how fast that was. But the faster you go, the easier it gets. The more precise, the more grounded, the more stable, because then, with the wings really, really working. And so you get into this slightly scary state of mind where you just think, I can just go faster and faster and faster, because the faster you go, the easier it becomes. And clearly you get to a stage where that actually reverses quite quickly. I never got there. But I just loved it. And then the noise of the thing and the privilege and just knowing what you're sitting in. But it does make you real. The closing speeds on road cars are absolutely shocking. I'm just trying to think of an analogy. It'd be like going out in a GT3 RS against, a field of 2CVs. It's not that different. The performance game. And if you think about the numbers, you're talking about a car which weighs, 900 kilos with, 750 horsepower, full ground effect bodywork, massive slicks. It's not really surprising that, you have that level of performance differential. But but when you're in it, when you first get in it, you think, oh, how the hell can I ever drive this sort of thing? But if you drive it for enough, you do sort of get used to it a bit. And it's never anything other than shockingly fast, but it stops being scary. You stop, you stop putting your foot down and just immediately lifting again, because it's just too much. That stops, and you do start to enjoy it, and you can start to really, appreciate what you're in. But obviously within the confines of, taking no risks, just taking no risks at all with it, not doing anything remotely silly, because, can you imagine if I'd bent it or broken it or done anything? The Intercooler's first ever track day, that's all I'd remember from it was, damaging this, priceless, historical artifact, and you can't do it. I was just very lucky to get in it. Hope to again one day. Very,
very cool. What a thing. So what else have you been? You bought a Caterham since we last spoke.
I did. Yeah, I did buy a Caterham. I just haven't owned a Caterham for near. I'm sort of one of these guys who just sort of thinks that if you don't have a Caterham in your life, there's something missing. And I hadn't had one in my life for 15 years or so. And I think I'll tell you what it was. Caterham came out with this thing called the Super 7 recently. Which is basically, it was a sort of slightly retro thing, and it was a 1.6 litre. But it had this sort of, the retro styling, and they put it on Genry throttle body, so it sounded like it had carburetors. And I drove this thing, and I just loved it. And I just thought, I can't believe I haven't got one of these things, because I've owned lots over the time, and I've raced them, and I've built them, and I've crashed one, and I've done most things that you can do with a Caterham. And I just hadn't owned one for a long time. And then what was I doing? When I was very young, so even before I was a motoring journalist, and this was the one that I crashed, I had a Super Sprint from about 1985, which was just a really simple live axle cross-flow car. And because I was an idiot and didn't know how to drive, I bent it on my first ever track day at Goodwood and couldn't afford to repair it. So that was the end of that. But I absolutely loved that car. And I just thought, I don't want a car for doing track days, because I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time on race tracks anyway, but I just want a fun pub car. And I've got my really slow stuff. I've got my 2CV and my old Fiat 500 and that sort of stuff. But I just I just really, it's like you get that itch, and it doesn't go away. So I was talking to Andy Noble, who used to be the sales manager of Caterham, and now runs a company called Sevens and Classics down at Brands Hatch. And I've known Andy for, well, as long as I've been doing this job. And I knew that he'd look after me. And I went, what do you got? And he said, it's just an interesting car's just come in. It's been in France, but it's had its engine rebuilt, and it was a perfect car. I didn't even know this car existed, because it's basically, in terms of its chassis, it's a modern Caterham. So it's got what they call the S3 chassis. So it's got the Dion rear end, and it's got a 5-speed box, but it's got the old cross-flow engine in it. So it's a 1700 Super Sprint, just like the thing that I crashed 35 years ago. 1700, 135 horsepower, makes it, twin Webers hung off the side, bit of, old Ford iron. And I went and drove it, fell in love with it, and it's just a joyous thing. I mean, I'm so lucky to drive all these sorts of things, but frankly, whatever I'm driving, I'm always sitting there thinking, frankly, I'd rather be in the Caterham. And I've rediscovered, all through my life, I'm forever getting up at strange times in the morning to go and drive stuff, because, that's what you have to do. And particularly if you've got fast cars, you need to drive them on quiet roads. And, even where I live down in the Welsh borders, the roads are only truly quiet when everyone's asleep. So I'm very good at getting up and driving cars for work purposes. What the Caterham has made me do is I just get up and, one of my favourite things that I do is I'm about an hour and a half from Pen y Fan, which is the highest mountain in South Wales. And I will get up in the middle of the night when it's pitch dark, but I will time my arrival at Pen y Fan for when it's got light. So you climb the mountain. So I get in the Caterham, I howl over there in the darkness, park up and down the mountain, come back in, and I'm home before most people are out of bed and have their breakfast. And so you've had 3 hours of proper wheel time on amazing roads. You've climbed a mountain, so you've done your exercise for the day as well. And you really haven't done it for any other reason than that you can. I tend to be on my own. I tend to prefer it that way, because people tend to object to the way I drive that car when they're in the passenger seat. And I just love it. It's so simple, and it's so honest. And I even like driving it with the roof up. There's a sort of coziness that you get in that cockpit when you're just sort of snug in there and you're completely contained. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's the car that proves, again, the difference between fast and fun. It doesn't mean that fast cars aren't fun. What it does mean is that slow cars can be fun too. It's got 135 horsepower. I mean, by modern standards, I don't know what it'd do. I think it might just get under 6 seconds to 60. I mean, who cares? It's sort of, Focus ST sort of performance. Yeah. But it's so light and it's so immediate, and it just reminds me of all the reasons that I love driving cars, and all the reasons that I find, modern cars, which are forever larger, forever heavier, so disappointing. And it's kind of, I bought it as a bit of an experiment, because I didn't sort of know, I love the idea, but I didn't know what the reality would be like. And now I've got it, I can't see that I'd ever get rid of it. I think there will always be, until I'm just too old to do it, I think there will always be a Caterham in my life, because to me, a Caterham is driving.
Yeah, it's funny, because I think just before you'd been on the podcast last, you'd just driven the Super 7.
There you go.
And yeah, it's you say not fast, like that's not fast versus electric cars or whatever now. But that's still quick, and as you said, it weighs nothing.
Nothing.
And that's the most important part of it, isn't it? It weighs nothing.
Yeah, and unless you've driven a car that weighs, I think my car is genuinely under 500 kilos. Well, at least until you put me in it. But until you've driven something like that, I don't think, you must listen to people like you and me banging on about, how lightweight is so important. And you must have thought, well, is it really? You go and drive something like that, and you feel how reactive it is, but how within its own space it is, because there's never much momentum, and how easy they are to slide around because you don't have much mass to manage, and just how alive they feel. And when you get back into your sort of modern heavy SUV or whatever, just how everything feels like you're driving with oven gloves on, doesn't it? It's just, everything is so remote and distant and dull. And borrow one, rent one, do whatever, but just have that experience, because until you do drive a car that is properly light, and by properly light I mean half a ton, not sort of, because these days I think people think that, 1,200 kilos is really, really light. Which it is for a modern supercar. I mean, there aren't any modern supercars which weigh that, and apart from Gordon Murray's thing or whatever. If you get what does a GT3 RS weigh? 1,500 kilos, something like that?
1,500 kilos or something.
Yeah,
maybe.
So
maybe
okay,
14,
and everybody thinks that's a really light car. Well, try something that is 1/3 of that weight, and it just feels totally different. And it's a totally different. And no disrespect to GT3 RSs, all they're like, because everybody knows what fans of those I am, but a truly light car is a different experience. It's almost like you haven't driven until you've driven one of those. So, yeah, if you can, any way, get yourself into it, just to have that experience and see what it is that we're banging on about. It may change your view of stuff.
It does, and it's an amazing reset before going back to, if you drive, you get to drive or trying out modern, fast-ish stuff, and then you drive something that's 500 kilos. You're like, okay, hang on, what are we chasing here? What is going on? This is not fun.
Your Radical's the same, isn't it?
Yeah, that's 5. I think it's sub 600 with me in it.
Yeah, with you in it. Okay, so that's like my Caterham. Yeah, and there's nothing else like it, is there? In terms of the feel. Yeah.
No. But I think that on a racetrack just feels like solid, and because it's got aero and whatever. So there's nothing like that driving that on a racetrack, but driving a Caterham on a small road, you just can't. There's literally nothing replicates that feeling remotely. You put me in a Caterham, and I think I'm some sort of WRC driver. I don't know why, but
because it lets you do that, doesn't it?
In a normal car, like an M2 or something, no way, no way. I'm just cruising around.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is the joy of those cars, and that is, I think, it clearly is why that car has been in production in one form or another for, well over 60 years now. Well over 60 years. And it's, conceptually, it's exactly the same car now as it was then. And, Colin Chapman just got it so right. And I'm sure that while, there are fuel remains, that cars like that will be. What do you think of the idea of an electric Caterham?
I'm not averse to the idea. If it can be light, I think it might be interesting. Whether it's going to be truly as engaging and whatnot, I think you're going to have one gear, and changing gear is such a huge part of driving enjoyment on a road. Like drive a car with PDK versus a manual gearbox, GT3 for example. One is significantly more engaging than the other.
Yes, yeah, and that's the thing. It's engagement. It sounds so obvious, but it's about having stuff to do. Yeah. Isn't it? And changing gear is a thing to do. It's something for your left hand to do, it's something for your left leg to do, and it's something which requires thought, and that is what gets you involved in the process. And if you remove that, then you have to remove something of that. And in a car whose very reason for existence is to provide that involvement, I don't know. I look for. I approach it with an open mind. I look forward to it, to driving it. I think one thing which does stand which is lucky, is that people don't expect Caterhams to have huge ranges, so they won't need to put a big battery on it. People won't want to go and Caterhams which will do 300 miles on a charge. So I think they will still be able to keep it quite light. Whether they're able to make it anything like as involving as something which makes that noise and which requires you to manage it so much, because what they mustn't do is produce a point and squirt machine. But it's very difficult to know what else they can do, because you can't. Well, you can put a gearbox in it, but why? It would just be completely artificial. It would add weight, and it would serve no great purpose. Yeah,
we'll see. I think, it's not just changing gear, whatever. It's like feeling the vibrations of the engine come through the car, and I think
it's feeling part of the machine, isn't it?
For that purist experience, I just don't know. What we'll see what happens, but I don't know. You'll end up with some crazy powerful small stuff, but that's not what we're after, is it? That's literally what we've not been talking about, the opposite of that. But a Caterham's not very is quite efficient, and maybe we'll get alternative fuels.
is that, I can see an electric Ferrari working because, as you and I know, the vast majority of people who buy Ferraris don't buy them for what they're like to drive. They don't buy them because they have amazing handling. We know that. And so people will still buy Ferraris because they'll still want to be seen at Ferraris. People only buy Caterhams to drive them, don't they? Nobody ever bought a Caterham as a fashion accessory. I mean, my children think I look like an idiot in a Caterham, and that's absolutely fine. I probably do. It just doesn't concern me. But there's no other reason. So if you take away the reason that people bought those cars in the first place because they were so involving to drive, does it not therefore follow that they're going to stop buying them? That's my real worry. And what I really hope is that there is some kind of exemption comes up whereby cars like that, so long as they run synthetic fuel, will be granted a stay of execution, and we'll all have to get a bit smart about how we use them and how we get the fuel, and hopefully it's not too expensive or whatever. But because other than that, I mean, I really do struggle to see how an electric Caterham could provide that level of driver involvement that we just take completely for granted. I mean, I was driving one, the new, what do they call it, the new 170S. 170R, the 3-cylinder Suzuki engine thing, the cheapest Caterham you can buy. I wasn't completely knocked out by it, to be honest with you, but it was still basically better than almost anything else that remotely that kind of money could buy. And if you take that away, what's left? I don't know. I worry about it.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. The ones that exist now will always exist. Whether you can fill them up, who knows? But it's an interesting one. And as soon as you start going electric,
there will be a way. Synthetic fuels will come along, and as I said, we'll have to get smart. But people thought that when horses no longer provided transport, that people wouldn't ride horses anymore. They didn't. They just found different ways of enjoying their recreation and they've been doing it ever since. And it will be the same. The business is too big to ignore. And there are too many viable solutions for it just to die. I mean, it's going to change, it's going to evolve, but I mean, I certainly don't think that in our lifetimes we are going to no longer, that a time will come where it is not possible to drive a car with an internal combustion engine on a public road. Yeah,
who knows? But we'll see. I think absolutely the other fuels will come in, and we'll have, because they're going to need that for longer range stuff. And if you can get 200 miles on a tank or something, and you start at home and you do a 200-mile loop, that's quite fun. That can be quite fun.
Absolutely.
I'm conscious that we're a little tight on time, so I normally do 5 questions, but since you've been on the podcast before, you've probably done most of them, so I'll cherry pick a couple. And what do you think is the best value car under 50k at the moment? And that can be new or used.
Best value car under 50k, something like a GT86 Toyota. I just think that if you pick up one of those that's a few years old, you'll pay buttons for it, and there's not very much out there that's you can use as a daily driver. Which I mean, they're such underrated cars. I absolutely love them, I think that as a value proposition, I often think about what I'd go and drive, just go and smoke about, and if I ever stop driving cars for a living, and that's always sort of somewhere on the list. Something like that, I would think.
Yeah, I'm very interested to drive the new one whenever those are around, because I don't
think it's going to be until next year. I think there is an event which I can't attend where sometime soon, but I don't think they're actually going to get into the UK until 22.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Most interesting car to you at the moment?
Most interesting car to me at the moment. God, I'm just trying to think. Well, I mean, the slightly flip answer is something like the Ferrari SF90, because I still don't understand who it's for. So that interests me a lot. But what's a better answer to that question? 911 GT3 interests me because it's such a different car. 911 GTS, that's an interesting car. Because Porsche, having previous GTSs until now have been basically part spin specials, where it's just a run out special where they take some stuff from the options list and they stick it in a car. They make it a bit more affordable, and they give it center lock wheels, and they smoke out the glass, and they create GTS. The new 992 911 GTS is almost where the old GT3 Touring was. And so it's got a lot of quite trick bits on it, turbo suspension, turbo brakes. It's not, you cannot spec a GTS on an S anymore, or anything close to it. There are lightweight option packs you can get on it, and having driven it, and having driven a manual rear drive car with the lightweight pack, I mean, it's unbelievably dynamic, and it's as close to being a replacement for the 991 Generation 2 GT3 Touring as I've driven, because as we know, the new GT3 has got much more hardcore, it's got much stiffer suspension, it's a much more aggressive road car, and much less of a daily driver. And I always wondered what Porsche was going to stick in that space, and now I think we know. So I think a manual rear drive GTS coupe with a few nice options on it is a very enticing thing.
Now, okay, but would you, obviously the powertrain's different, whatever, between those cars, but would you order a GTS, or would you order something different on that range? It's sort of assuming you can't buy a GT3. No, actually, you can order any of those cars. Which one would you actually like to drive?
For what purpose? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it?
Using.
Okay, I wouldn't have a 992 GT3 as a daily driver. Whereas, I know a couple of people who have 991 Gen 2 GT3 Tourings, manual cars. I'd absolutely have them as daily drivers, because they ride well enough, they're quiet enough, they can do all that stuff. Whereas to me, a GT3 now, rightly or wrongly, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, but it is much more of a recreational thing now. It's a thing that you go and drive when you have a reason to go and drive it. It's not the thing that you drive because it's Monday morning you've got to go to work. So I think as a daily car, I'd have a GTS, which is, and I never thought that I'd say that, but it's such a good car. And I know it hasn't got that engine in it, but it finds that balance. It handles well enough to satisfy 95% of what I want a car to do in that regard. Whereas at the same time, and I probably said this on the last podcast I was on, I have this thing that the amount of fun a car can provide is how enjoyable it is to drive, multiplied by the number of times you feel inclined to go and drive it. At one end of that, you've got something like an Aerial Atom, which is pretty much as fun as you can have with a steering wheel in your hand. But if it's raining or cold or anything, it's just going to stay in the set. So you're not going to drive it very often. At the other end of it, you've got, an electric crossover SUV, which is the dullest thing in the world, but you drive it every day. And so the car I'm looking for is the car that you want to drive. It's one of the reasons I like Caterham so much, because I think what people don't understand about Caterhams is that once you've got the roof up and you've got the heater on and you've got the screen heater on it, actually you can do huge distances in them. They've even got a bit of stuff in the back to put to put a little bit of luggage in. And I just love that facility, that you don't think, oh God, well, it's October, so I'm going to have to park the car now because it's going to be too wet or it's going to be too cold to drive it. These are cars you can use year round. And I think with the GTS in a completely different place and at a completely different level, it's the same sort of thing. It does have that. There isn't a reason you can't use this car, and every time you get in it, it will make you feel happy and special about being in it. Whereas a GT3, wonderful on the right roads, wonderful on the right track, and not at all bad getting there and back. But it's just not the sort of thing that I would see myself, if I had a collection of cars, and if you have a GT3, you've got lots of other stuff too. And on a wet Monday morning with, a slow commute into London to drive, you're just going to get in something else, aren't you? Whereas if the GTS was out there, you'd probably take that, and that's the difference.
And because I drove my first 992 recently, I drove a Targa 4 Heritage Edition, whatever, that one.
Yeah.
And that, I came out of driving that and I thought, you know what? A 2S, for me, I think might be the perfect blend, because more usable, but also like less grip, less hardcore.
Much lighter.
and lighter than a Targa for sure.
Yeah.
And then I thought, do I want any more performance? Not necessarily. Do I want it to be any more grippy? Not really. Do I want it to be more locked down? Not really. So I'm sure at some point I'll drive a GTS. I'm driving a GT3 this week. Someone's letting me drive theirs, so I'm very interested to see what that's like. But yeah, it's kind of like how the thing with the Porsche range is there's so many options now. There's so many options, and we're starting to see the Cayman develop. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to come out, so we'll have had loads of stuff out like GT4 RS, and then possibly things after that, which sounds interesting. But yeah, all right, okay. Final question, because I know you've got to go. 5-car garage, Mark II, as it's going to be.
Okay, you presumably asked me this question a year ago, so I'm now going to come up with a completely different 5 cars. So I've got my GTS as my daily driver.
Yeah.
I need to have my racing car in there. So I presume I don't have a budget for this. I can have whatever I like, yeah?
No budget.
Okay. So my racing car, I've obviously got my ex-Joe Bonnier Lola T70 Mark III-B, because that's of everything that I've ever driven. That's what I would most like to race. So I've got my daily driver. I've got my racing car. I'd have my Caterham. I might even have the actual Caterham that I've got, because it just really works for me. So that's my sort of everyday knockabout thing. I'd want something really old, because I love really old stuff. So because I've got a bit of a family history of Bentleys, I'd probably have my dad's 4.5 litre Bentley. And I need something.
Cool.
I need something to tow the race car, don't I?
Probably. Yeah.
I'll have so I'll have, what will I have? I'll either have a really old Toyota Amazon, or I'll have a brand new Range Rover to do that. There you go. So we'll call it the Range Rover, the Caterham, the Bentley, the Lola, and the Porsche.
Good garage.
There you go.
There you go.
Happy days.
I'll get you by. Right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Not at all. Great pleasure.